Hey friends, welcome back to Homestead on a Prayer. This cold, dreary winter day today is the perfect day to talk about seed starting. Now, March is a great time to start seeds. There are so many seeds that you can start in March. I think that actually it is really prime seed starting season. So today we're going to talk about some of those seeds and some of those options that you can start in your garden this month. So in March, there are a couple different types of seeds that you can start. So there are some cold tolerant seeds that you can actually start directly outside. Usually in March, it's going to depend a little bit on your specific weather. Here in my area, I'm in Connecticut in Zone 6. My last frost date is usually around May 15th. And year to year, the weather varies a little bit. But on the years when the snow is gone by March and the ground is unfrozen, there are lots of seeds that we can start directly outside in the garden. And if you're a little farther south of me and a little bit warmer, then it'll be even easier for you to start these seeds in March. So we're going to go through two categories of seeds. The first category of seeds we're going to talk about today is seeds that you can direct sow or start directly outside in the ground in your garden in spring. And once we've covered those seeds, we're going to talk a little bit about some seeds that it's time to get started inside to be transplanted out after your last frost. So for the exact dates that you would want to sow or transplant these seeds, you are going to want to pay attention to the specific weather in your area. As I said, I'm here in Connecticut. My last frost day is mid-May. So these dates may vary a little bit depending on where you are, but hopefully this video will give you a little bit of a guideline and a starting point. So first, let's jump right into the seeds that I am planning to direct sow in my garden or start directly in the ground this month of March. So I have a pile of different seed varieties here. When you are looking for seeds that you're going to direct sow in March, unless you're in an area that is significantly warmer than me, you're going to want seeds that are cold tolerant that can handle a little bit of a frost. And we're going to talk about what some of those seeds are right now. So first is peas. Now peas are usually the first seed that I start in my garden. I've got some sugar snap peas here. I've got snow peas here. Regular peas like this are very cold tolerant and they can handle being sown in cool conditions. So I think tradition says that you start your peas outside on St. Patrick's Day. That's obviously going to vary a little bit depending on what zone you're in, what climate you're in, how your ground is doing, what your weather's like. So in my area here in Connecticut, I can usually start my peas mid to late March. On years when we have kind of a winter that drags out and doesn't really want to leave, sometimes I do have to wait. Into early April, but for the most part, I plan on starting my peas in March. So that is a great option for something that you can start outside. Peas tend to be really easy to grow. You can just stick the seeds in the ground. No need to fuss with grow lights or starting early inside. And as I said, they are very, very cold tolerant. The main requirement that peas have is something to climb on. So we'll be starting pea seeds together in my garden sometime later this month, depending on weather conditions, so definitely join me for that. The next variety of seeds that I plan to direct sow outside of my garden in March is lettuce. Now lettuce comes in many different varieties, but if you have some cold tolerant varieties, some things to look for are plants that have winter in the name. A lot of times you can tell by reading your seed catalog or reading your seed packet what type of lettuce it is. As long as it is a cold tolerant variety, you can usually plant that very early in the season. So I'll be planting butter crunch lettuce directly outside. Tango leaf lettuce is also very cold tolerant. My black seeded Simpson lettuce, I like to plant this outside fairly early in the season. And there's many types of lettuce that can handle being planted when it's still really cold out. So often I plant some of this as early as I plant my peas, as early as mid to late March. Lettuce is quick growing and you can continuously sow more lettuce seeds throughout the season. But, I like to take advantage of that quick maturity date and the cold tolerance of lettuce. Make sure that I plant some early in the season and get an extra early harvest of lettuce. So lettuce will be going out in my garden probably around the same time that I plant my first crop of peas. Now radishes are another great option that you can plant when it's still really cold out. I've got a few different radish types here. Radishes are similarly to lettuce. They have a really quick maturity date, sometimes even quicker. In ideal growing conditions, some radishes will be ready to harvest in just a few weeks. And because they're so cold tolerant, this is a great option to get out in your garden. One really nice thing about radish seeds is with the quick maturity date, if you have a bed that you're planning to plant some heat-loving crops in later, maybe tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, something like that, you know, those aren't going to be ready to plant until, in my area, May. It's going to be a little different depending on what area you're in. So if I start some radishes in that same bed in March, they're going to be harvested and gone by the time it's time to get those heat-loving plants out there, which allows me to get 2 crops from that area in a season. So radishes are a great option to plant outside in March. Along with lettuce, there are many other greens that are really cold tolerant and can be great to plant this time of year. You know, spinach is, a well-known common option. Spinach is very cold tolerant. Spinach would much rather grow in cold temperatures than it would in the heat of summer. So spinach is a great option to plant. Arugula is another great option. You know, a lot of these plants won't really grow well in the summer heat. So plant them now in March while it's cold. Get a harvest from them. And then similarly to radishes, you can use that same growing space later in the season for something that is not so cold tolerant. Now, I mentioned greens. We have some Asian greens here that I like to plant early in the season as well. I've got tatsoi, I've got pak choi. Lots of greens like that can tolerate a lot of cold. They can tolerate a frost. So that is another great option to get your garden going early in the season. Now, I have another category here. Not everything in this category will be cold tolerant. I have culinary herbs. Now, dill can tolerate some cooler temperatures. So when it gets into later March, maybe late March, possibly into early April, depending on the growing conditions that season, dill is a great one to plant outside too. So that is what I am planning to direct sow in my garden in the month of March. Now, those are not the only seeds I'm going to be planting in March. As I mentioned, March is prime time for seed starting. And inside in the warmth and shelter of my house, I will be starting lots of other seeds that will be getting ready to be transplanted out after my last frost date. So let's talk a little bit about those. Now, the first one I want to mention kind of goes along with the dill a little bit. Parsley is actually quite cold tolerant, but I do like to start parsley inside in my house just because it takes quite a while to grow. I find that compared to other plants, parsley takes a fair amount of time to germinate, and then in the beginning it grows pretty slowly. So I will be starting some parsley inside in my house in March. This will get transplanted out. I don't really have to wait till after my last frost, but I may end up waiting that late. But either way, I'm going to get this started in early March to make sure that it has a nice long season of growth before I transplant it outside. Now next, my brassicas are all going to get started inside right at the beginning of March. By the time you see this video, it's going to get posted a little bit after I'm filming it. These will probably actually already be started. So brassicas include a lot of different plants. Broccoli is in that family, cauliflower, cabbage, kale, Brussels sprouts. All of those plants in my area benefit from being started a little bit early. So I like to start those right at the beginning of March to transplant them outside in mid-April. So here I have some broccoli plants that I'll be starting. I have a few different varieties of broccoli. We'll be starting, as I said, some cauliflower. And I've got a few different varieties of cabbage that I'll be starting. Now, all the plants in this family, at least the ones that we're talking about today, are actually fairly cold tolerant. So in theory, you may be able to start these directly outside in March. In reality, though, it's been my experience that these plants do a little bit better when I start them in my house and grow them inside for about 6 weeks or so, and then transplant them out. So these will be started early March, and I'll be transplanting these out into my garden in mid-April, which is about 4 weeks or so before my last frost date. So, brassicas, great one to start. Now we come to some of the classic summer vegetables that just take a little bit longer to grow. So I have a selection of peppers here. I have both hot peppers and sweet peppers. And I will be starting these. See, I've got some jalapenos here. And I've got Lots of different sweet peppers here. We've got shishitos, we've got corno de toro peppers, and many, many more. Peppers take a fair amount of time to grow. I find that peppers are not cold tolerant at all. Peppers like heat. They like it, pretty much as hot as you can get it, at least as hot as you can get it here in my area. So the reason for starting peppers early is because they take quite a bit of time to grow. If I waited until it was warm, until the frost had passed and the soil in my garden had a chance to fully warm up to the point where peppers will like it, I wouldn't have time to get very much of a harvest at all, or in some cases, possibly not even any harvest before the first fall frost came and killed my pepper plants. So if you live in a cold area like me, you want to make sure you get your pepper plants started early so that they're already larger plants. They're already fairly established by the time your frost is gone and it's time to plant them outside. So fairly early March, I will be starting all my peppers inside my house, planning to transplant these out towards the end of May. And finally, we come to my love of the garden, my tomatoes. So tomatoes, I will be starting in March as well. Now, in my area, I will be starting these a little bit later than my peppers. Tomatoes do have a fairly long growing season, similarly to peppers, but because tomato seedlings grow a little more quickly than peppers, I find that peppers take a little bit longer to germinate and they just take a little bit longer to grow into larger plants. Tomatoes are pretty quick at both of those things. So I'll be starting these later in March. Usually about, I would say probably mid to late March, probably late March this year, I'll be starting my tomatoes inside. So those are a great one to start. Usually you want to start them about 6 to 8 weeks before your last frost date, whatever that may be in your area. So I hope that gives you guys a good idea of what seeds you can start in March. There's so many possibilities. I think once March hits, it starts to really feel like garden season. Even though it might be cold outside, we may even get more snow here in Connecticut. But it's going to feel like spring is within reach once I have seedlings growing in my house and maybe even some seedlings sprouting outside. So I hope this is a helpful starting point for you. If you have any other plants that you like to start in March that I did not mention here, go ahead and let me know in the comments because I would love to hear from you. Now, as I said, those of you growing in different areas of the country may have a very different seed starting schedule than I do, but use this as a jumping off point and you can adjust based on when your last frost day is. So, as I said, I hope this is helpful. I hope that you are getting excited about spring and seed starting, and I can't wait to see you soon. I'll see you next time.